Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Be Better podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Perkins. Today's episode is called Be Better with the Big I Inclusion. What is Be Better Podcasting? Be Better Podcasting shares knowledge from fascinating people all the way to pop culture. You are encouraged to glean the content to be better in the world. Okay, let's get to it. We have two fascinating guests. And I'm going to let them introduce themselves because they do so many dynamic things and I don't want to mess it up. So let's transition to them. Ladies, thank you for joining me. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your knowledge you're about to share. How are you feeling?
Feeling great. Thanks so much for having us here. This is a great opportunity to join you in this conversation. I'm so happy to be here with Talisha.
Yes, same. Excited, Good Friday, right before the weekend. So feeling good. Thanks for having us here today.
Awesome. Happy Friday. We have Shamaya Lodge and Talisha Ming White joining us today. They're going to share their knowledge on inclusion. Ladies, the first $1 million question is just tell the audience a little bit about yourselves.
Sure. You want me to take it first? So, Shamaya Lodge, I have been working in corporate America for a little over 16 years, specifically in the financial industry. So, I've held many roles within the financial sector, from leading teams of individuals to recruiting talented professionals. Right now, I am really focused on racial equity work. So, I've been doing that for about 16 months now, where I met my good friend Talisha. But outside of that work, I do a lot in the community out here in Arizona. Specifically, I'm doing some work with the Black Philanthropy Initiative, and doing some work also with individuals who are returning home from being incarcerated.
And good afternoon. I'm Talisha Ming White. Same, it's so similar of Shamaya and I's path. I too have been in the financial industry for about 16 years now. I actually cut my teeth in retail though, but while working in the financial industry, I've held various roles within HR, affirmative action, compliance, but I spent a majority of my career in diversity, equity, and inclusion. So this is a subject that is very close to me. I'm very passionate about it. I'm also focused on racial equity work, specifically around historically Black colleges and universities. I'm a graduate of Tuskegee University, TU, So again, just very excited to be here. I sit on a number of boards in my local community, as well as some national boards for women's organizations. So again, just very excited to have the conversation about inclusion.
What is inclusion for our audience? What is your definition of inclusion?
So for me, my definition of inclusion is really kind of twofold, right? So I think about inclusion is having that seat at the table, being able to share your voice. But, how I lead in a space of inclusion is really rooted in equity, of really getting to know people individually and specifically so that I can make sure that their ideas, their values, their sense of belonging is really folded into that concept of inclusion.
Great answer. Really, Talisha covered it. I think for me, the only other thing that I would add when I start to think about inclusion is making sure us as individuals hear from others, right? So valuing their opinion and their perspective and not pushing our agenda on them, but really having an inclusive environment where you are looking at and listening to others and not pushing your agenda on them.
What would you say inclusion looks like in organizations and from people to people?
That's a great question. And Shamai, just to piggyback, I think this is a great feeder. You think about, we often hear about the golden rule, right? Treat people how you want to be treated. But when you think about the true sense of equity, it makes me think about the platinum rule. Treat people how they want to be treated, right? So again, it's about understanding people, being aware of what motivates them, what they find value in, understanding historically how they've been impacted by certain situations or their ideas, and it's really getting to the root of knowing your people. So when you think about from a corporate setting, of how they can implement or, value inclusion. It's, do you know your people? Do you know the people on your team? Do you know the people that you're engaging with? If you are in, upper levels of management or you're leading a team, really spending time to get to know your team, your peers, the people around you, and really leaning into what it is that they need from you versus what what you think they need, will really help to foster that environment of inclusion and belonging.
Absolutely, because to summarize everything you just said, Talisha, at the end of the day, people just really want to feel valued, respected, and supported. And so what good inclusion looks like in the corporate sector is just that, right? Are you supporting your people? Do they feel valued? Do they feel like they're being respected? And these are actually questions that organizations should be asking. They should regularly be surveying or doing a pulse check on their employees to see how they feel. How do they feel? Do they feel like they're being included in the bigger picture?
So would you say the major concern out there in organizations and in the world is we are not stopping to look at the other person and include them, with their characteristics into society, into the organization? Would that be a primary concern?
Right. We're not centering it on people. We're thinking about ourselves and our agenda. We have to center everything we do in the mindset of, well, how does this show up for others? Right. That's true inclusion when you start to think about, and how will this impact other people? Right. So kind of like removing yourself from the situation and really, really, really thinking about others. That's how you demonstrate great inclusion.
Yeah, and just to jump in, that's such a great point because it's hard to do that, right? And especially in environments where it's, be about yourself, focus on yourself, that or we're head down doing the work, that we often forget to hold our heads up and look around to say, how is what I'm doing impacting other people? Even how is what I'm doing in the sense of self impacting myself and how I then interact with other people. And so we have to be very intentional about centering on people so that we foster that environment of inclusion and belonging.
I appreciate both of your words, that intentional piece, because we're so stuck on the mission, why we exist, the vision, where we're going, that we forget it's about everyone getting that team together, moving forward. But I think leaders get stuck in, well, this is it, and this is how we all need to act. And no, we all have different characteristics and talents we can bring to moving forward. What is one strategy people can utilize, leaders in organizations or people to people, to really become aware of inclusion and really implement it?
I think it first needs to start with trust and transparency, right? So organizations need to really create a culture that is rooted in trust and transparency, where everyone feels like they belong to something bigger, right? And so I think that's primarily a place to start, right? What is the trust factors at your organization, right? I'm not going to feel included if I really can't trust you, right? Like, I don't know. And so it has to start with simple, practical things. We can't just jump to inclusion, which is why a lot of companies are DE&I, D&I, right? There's only a few unique companies that start with inclusion because they get that they have to center it on people. But a lot of companies are starting to understand that you should be starting with the I and back into it. To whereas people couldn't figure it out. So they just started with, okay, we're going to just start with the differences. We're going to start with the differences and we'll back into the inclusion piece. When it's done correctly, you start with it from an inclusive mindset.
And I think, too, a part of that strategy is recognizing where you are as an organization that then, builds into that trust and transparency. You can't gloss over historically what may have happened in your organization, historically what has impacted the type of conversations you have within an organization, right? Because at some point in time, we were told you don't talk about race, religion, sexual orientation, diversity. You don't talk about these things, right? That's a conversation you have at home. You don't bring that into the workplace. So I think, for leaders, they have to recognize again what type of culture they have. Like Shemaya said, whether it's an assessment, whether it's through focus groups, to understand where are the areas of opportunities what's working well for us, but then where do we need to really focus our attention to so that we can begin to build that culture of inclusion?
Would a start for organizations and people be a simple activity of bringing the team together and talking out loud about your unique differences that you can contribute and move everyone forward? Would that be one activity to start things?
Sure, just getting started, right? We do that in a lot of our spaces in the corporate sector. We have these brave space and safe space conversations where you can lean into, understand and learn more about people. And those are all great, right? Just getting started. I don't care what you do, you just got to do something. Start having a conversation. But I love where Talisha was going, right? Many companies, we just want to jump right to equality, right? Like we just want to kumbaya, everyone's on the same page, let's continue. We just want to harmonize. But to Talisha's point, we have to get to the root of everything, and it starts with equity, right? We can't even begin to have these inclusive environments unless we're really unless we truly, truly, truly understand impacts of other people. We can't, it's going to be a recipe for disaster, in my personal opinion.
You mentioned DE&I. Can you explain to our listeners? There may be people who don't know what that means. Can you break that down real quick? Is it D, diversity, E, equity, and I, inclusion?
Yes, you got it.
All right,
But
very
again,
good.
some companies may say equality, but that's a conversation for another day. But yes, primarily it should be equity.
Equity, okay. As you know, the world is struggling right now in areas. We have a divided world in many sectors. How can inclusion be a victory for us?
And I'll jump in very quickly. A Littlest coworker has joined. So when you think about the environment of inclusion, is recognizing where people are. What's in the environment, what's going on with them. The wins in inclusion. I think about some of the best leaders that I have either worked for or engaged with is some of them have done these exercises where it's like getting to know like the best of me, or like, getting to understand the needs of me. So you get the best of me when, like what I need from you, you get the worst of me when, and how I can help you. And the wins in those type of conversations, again, it goes back to really knowing people, what motivates them, what drives them, what talents they have. Because a lot of times we spend a lot of spinning our wheels and circling because we don't recognize where people can really contribute because of their experiences, lived and learned experiences, what they bring to the table. And because we aren't having these deep level conversations of getting to know people, we're not uncovering the wins that we can have either as a work team, as a volunteer team, just in relationships, period. So the wins of inclusion is, again, identifying the best of people, those connections that you have, really building strong and sustainable relationships. I think is really when you think about the wins of inclusion.
I have nothing to add there. She covered it all. It really is seeking to understand the best of people. Just like Talisha explained how her great leaders actually infused that in their culture that they were leading. So
Both of you are doing current and obviously going to be doing future work with inclusion. What can you just share a little bit about your journey and what you're leading there?
absolutely, really great question. So the work I'm leading right now is really focused on justice involved individuals, aka returning citizens, aka formerly incarcerated individuals, and or folks with some level of conviction on their background, right? And so when we think about inclusion, I am fighting right now so hard for society to include these individuals in the conversation as they start to either reacclimate back into society and or seek out opportunities for employment, right? And so I'm fighting to make sure they're included in the conversation, let alone have a seat at the table. So this is really, really, really near and dear to my heart.
And the work I'm leading right now is focused on historically Black colleges and universities, really to to work to help the corporate community understand the value that these institutions still have in today's society and the brilliant minds and innovations that is built on this campus. Helping them understand that you have to do more than this, just showing up to recruit the talent. It's really about a holistic approach to investing. So this call to action to invest, empower, and advocate. How are you leveraging your voice when HBCUs are not at the table, when you're having conversations around higher education and opportunities? And so again, just recognizing the significant impact and continued contributions that historically Black colleges and universities have to us.
What would your experienced selves say to your younger selves if you could go back in time? This is a question I pose every episode because I want the listeners to understand from different generations this answer. So who would like to go first?
I'll take it first. My experienced self will tell my younger self to stay true to you. Don't ever shy away from your voice. Speak up and speak loud. Always keep your chin up. No's does not mean no right. It just probably just mean no right now. Keep pushing, keep going. But just stay the course. Don't shy away. Do not shy away.
The first thing I would say to my younger self is 40 is not old. I'll be 40 in a few days, and as you can hear in the background, I've got a toddler that keeps me young. But along the same lines of Shamaya, I think growing up, you had some well-intentioned individuals in your life that gives you advice around how you should show up in corporate spaces or environments where we traditionally have not been heard. And sometimes that can give you a sense of imposter syndrome of like, do I belong here? Is my voice really valued? And, is it worth the fight? And I would just tell my younger self to keep going. It is worth it. I think about the type of future I'm trying to create for this one here, as well as my teenagers. So again, the opinion to my younger self was keep pushing, even when you hit walls, keep climbing, because you will eventually find your way to a yes.
How do both of you balance the career life and the family life?
It's interesting. I'm a mother of 4 little girls who are traditionally homeschooled. So they've been homeschooled since before, distance learning was a thing due to the pandemic. And I think they're thriving and excelling in that space. I feel like I'm just the only one out of place because I've never worked from home pre-COVID. And so it's been a little wild. But I think that all of the work I do is centered in family. And so keeping family front of mind, knowing that I have to give myself grace, right? It's okay. It's okay if, you told someone you're going to get that email to them by 4:30, but you send it at 5:15. It's okay. It's okay to just shut down, at 3:30 sometimes because you got to make sure your kid is somewhere by 4:00. It's just okay. So I would just say, continue just to give yourself grace. Your kids are watching you, right? They're watching your behavior, so you want to make sure that you are, demonstrating what it means to just be balanced at all times.
And a critical component of that is self-care, because if you aren't taking care of yourself, you can't show up in balance. Same, I'm centered on family. And so I make sure part of my self-care is making sure I have time for them, right? That I carve out time for them, but I also carve out time for myself to rest and reset. I have a good girlfriend. I love, she calls it, she's going to take her radical rest time, right? In spite of, being in a world where it's like, you're always on the go. You got to do this. You've got to, have 5, jobs and 8 streams of this and 8 streams of that. Well, who's championing rest? Who's championing resetting? And so self-care is so critical to be able to, as we say, balance it all, because it's a lot. I think the pandemic really showed us that we already were probably juggling too much, and we're trying to quickly get back to that. But it's okay to say, you know what? No, I'm only going to align with those things that, speak value and life into my soul, my spirit, my space, so that I can show up as my best self when I'm called to my purpose.
Well said. I appreciate both your words. I'm doing a podcast in early May on mindfulness that touches on that, taking care of the body, mind, and soul. last couple questions. Any additional thoughts, advice to share with the audience?
I will say just very quickly when it comes to the work and really the journey of inclusion, diversity, equity, inclusion, be patient. I know we want a lot of things to change very quickly, fast, and a number of them you feel like they should, but we have to recognize that it didn't take us overnight to get to where we are, to why these conversations are needed. So the change and the work is not going to happen overnight. And if you try to take on too much too fast and you're not intentional, thoughtful, or even really strategic about it, that's when you sometimes reach those hurdles for things to not be sustainable. So figure out where you need to start and do the work. As Shemaya said before, give yourself grace. It's a journey. Sometimes you're going to get it right, and sometimes you're going to get it wrong. We are not the experts in all things. So be patient with yourself, and give yourself grace as you go on this journey of inclusion.
And celebrate the wins, right? I think it's so important. I actually received a text message about a week or so ago from one of my old boss, my old leaders in the organization. He's like, "Don't call me boss." One of my old leaders in the organization, and Caucasian middle-aged man. He simply said, "I see you," and it brought me to tears. I haven't worked with this man or for this man in years, but for him to literally send me a text and say, "I see you," it just hit different, right? It just means that people are doing the work. They understand how important it is to recognize others. Many people who, like, I can't necessarily say that I have historically been seen in spaces. And so for him to say that, it just felt different. And so for that, I celebrated the fact that times are changing and people are recognized. And I needed to recognize him for that. I said, "Wow, well, thank you. And here is what these three little words meant to me. So thank you." So, yeah.
The power of words. Isn't that beautiful? How can do you have any social media or emails that you can be contacted at in case our listeners need more education or have any questions?
Sure, I'm on LinkedIn. So linkedin.com/Shemaya Lodge. That's how you can find me. SHAM as in Mary, IA, LODGE.
The same. I'm on LinkedIn as well. It's Taleisha, Taleisha Ming, Ming White, no hyphen. So, looking forward, if anybody wants to reach out, obviously this is something we're both very passionate about and love to have conversations, as well as, people that may have more experience. Always looking to learn. This is an environment where you can never know too much.
Excellent job, ladies. Thank you so much for your time and sharing your wisdom. Thank you so much. Uh, Please don't close out. I want to talk to you offline. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us.